Episode 3 of The Whiners with Jeff Norman and Ryan Milton and Wiley Michelle. Our special guest tonight is Kevin Lynn, the Executive Director of the Institute for Sound Public Policy. I'm not sure if I have enough oxygen in my lungs to get all of that out.
No, that's why I do yoga in the morning.
Kevin had an op-ed published recently, about a week or so ago, in Newsweek about immigration tied to the Springfield, Ohio controversy, and we'll be talking about that. But first, why don't we say what we're each drinking? For me, this is the first. I think to some extent, we're all a little bit influenced by marketing, but I have to confess, this is a time when I'm like totally yielded to the marketing. I don't know anything about this wine, except that Trader Joe's was advertising it as a seasonal special. So instead of focusing on Halloween, they have artwork that relates to Dia de los Muertos, which is the day after Halloween, big holiday in Mexico. It's a way to celebrate people who have died, friends, relatives, and so forth. In kind of a lighthearted way, they often reminisce about the good old days and funny stories and stuff like that, which I think is kind of a cool holiday. So anyway, that's what I'm drinking. $7.99 at Trader Joe's. And no, this is not a commercial for Trader Joe's. How about the rest of you beautiful humans?
Well, what I'm drinking is Phantom, which is a proprietary red blend from California. And it's the Bogle Vineyards. And it's one of my favorite wines. It's not $7.99 at Trader Joe's. It's about $13 at Total Wine. I don't know if you have Total Wine out there, Jeff,
Yes.
where you are.
Yes.
I know, Wiley, you probably have Total Wine out there.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah,
Totally.
but it's a Petite Syrah and a Zinfandel blend. It's very, very jammy, they say. It's jammy.
Oh, jammy.
Yeah. I can eat it with peanut butter.
And yeah.
I am not drinking wine at all tonight because I got a headache last week. So I decided I was going to drink this Camus cognac that a friend gave me for my birthday. Yeah.
Camus as in the winemaker cognac?
I don't know because it was a gift.
Yeah.
Oh wow, that's a
That
slow
is.
brew.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm doing the old gentleman check.
Whoa. Are you old enough? Can we see some ID?
Well, I got my older brother to go down to the store and get it for me, so I think I'm okay.
You didn't
All
have a
right.
fake ID? That's the way to do it.
Well, in the old days, fake IDs worked, but I don't think they work nowadays. I remember I got mine when I was in high school from the back pages of Rolling Stone. And
Now-
it didn't look the least bit real, but everybody accepted it anyway.
What was the drinking age at that time in your state?
I think it was 18, so I was, 16,
Not a
17.
big jump, yeah. Because
Yeah,
we used to be able to go over with fake IDs to New Jersey when it was, I think, 18 or 19, and be able to load up.
Nice.
You had to take
And
the
then-
jug handle to get there, though. That was rough. Hop the highway median.
No, we went all back roads from where I was. I grew up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania.
Bucks County.
Yeah.
I lived in Delaware County.
Okay. Philadelphia.
Yeah, Philadelphia.
And you're not drinking at all, Wiley. Was that what you said?
No, I
No,
got
she's drinking
drink
cognac.
cognac.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
Yeah,
was.
I don't
But
mind.
do you sip cognac? You don't really drink it, do you?
Yeah, mine's more of a. That was the goal. Is no headaches today. Yeah, we start at 4 p.m. my time, so
Oh
Right.
boy.
I
But
learned
but,
a
it,
lesson.
but the thing is that it's a brandy, and there are grapes, and I know that's Camus, which is a wine maker. So it's almost wine. Did you heat it up at all?
Did you just say heat it?
Yeah.
Considering
Over-
I put ice in it, I'm gonna have to
Oh,
say no to
okay.
that.
The
No.
opposite.
Is that a thing?
Okay. Well,
Am I supposed to?
Well, there
Ryan,
are
you're a
ways.
connoisseur.
There are ways.
I know.
Now, speaking
What
of that,
is
Kevin, I have to address the elephant in the room here that has been hanging over our heads like the sword of Damocles for now going on a few weeks. And that is the international controversy of corks in wine bottles versus screw caps. This has been a point of consternation for Jeff because he has a wine pump. And the screw tops don't allow his wine pump to fit over the bottle to suck all the air out since he only drinks about half of a bottle at a time. So while I gave him some very flippant responses in the past about
Terrible answer. Terrible answer.
terrible answers, so
You owe the audience a great answer now to compensate.
an explanation. Well, so let me just say is that screw tops are definitely cheaper, but they have migrated to the upper shelf of wines, and essentially what people claim about them is that they prevent things like cork taint, which could be a situation where too much oxygen gets into the bottle, and then the wine is sort of spoiled from that process. So that's why people claim that screw caps are good, but they have a downside, which is that the cork allows oxygen and allows the aromas of the wine to expand and mature, and the screw top doesn't allow that. So it can be kind of it can affect the wine in a negative way. So that is kind of the thing I was looking at, and the solution to the cork versus screw top dilemma doesn't solve your air pump, your wine pump issue, but it's just to stick it in the refrigerator. Because refrigerating it, I think Wiley, that's what you did last time, right? You refrigerated.
That is what I did.
So
yeah.
you see that is one solution. Whereas Jeff, did you refrigerate your wine between?
No, I think the better solution would be for people who make screw top bottles to make the opening the same size as cork, so I could use a wine pump. I will one by one be contacting every winemaker in the world to inform them that is what they need to do.
That's a cottage industry, Jeff. You can begin your own wine cap business.
I wonder what they drink in Springfield, Ohio.
Yeah, there you
A
go.
good question.
Our esteemed guest, as I said, wrote an op-ed dated September 13th, 2024. You are quite the expert on immigration issues, not so much about specifically Springfield.
Right. So I overlay what I know about immigration onto Springfield, which is how I came up with the title. Springfield is emblematic of America's immigration death spiral. The editor loved it. This will sell.
Wow.
So yeah.
Let's get into the op-ed.
Sure. I've been writing op-eds for a couple years for Newsweek, mostly in the area of immigration. And Batya Ungar Sargon had reached out to me and said, "Hey, can you do something for Friday?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, I'd love to." On Springfield, I'm like, yeah, I could do something for Springfield. And what we're seeing now, and this is, when I say it's emblematic, it truly is, because what's going on in Springfield is going on either to a greater or lesser degree in cities, municipalities, townships, counties all over America. I live in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, in the city of Lancaster. Several years ago, the BBC said we were the refugee capital of America, and that wasn't hyperbole. We have an organization here. It's an NGO called Church World Services. This is an organization that gets paid to relocate, at the time, refugees. Now they're pretty much relocating anyone and everyone that comes across the border and getting tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, of American federal taxpayer dollars to do this, plus a lot of state and local funding as well. To me, it's a racket, it's a grift. For instance, during the time of Trump, when Trump had knocked down the number of refugees to about 80,000 that he was going to permit in the country, their lobbyists were all over Capitol Hill trying to get legislators to increase the volume of refugees. So they get paid per head. So this, ladies and gentlemen, is a racket. And there are organizations out there like Catholic Charities, Lutheran Refugee Services, HIAS, a number of others. And over the last 2 years, they've been joined by lots of smaller organizations. And there's a lot of it tied to child trafficking, because I think of it all. There's a human trafficking element to this. There's over 300,000 that we can't account for unaccompanied children in this country now that have come across our borders. And for a long time, they were being flown into Florida, and DeSantis and his attorney general pretty much put a stop to that. But that's what's going on. The scope is amazing. When you look at the number of immigrants coming into this country, the numbers and the percentage of native born versus foreign born is absolutely unprecedented. We had these huge waves of immigration in the early 20th century, like late 19th century, early 20th century. And this blows all of that away. It's quite possible as many as 8 million people who are not technically, but actually are inadmissible have come across our borders.
So, I mean, I would like to, if you could expand on some of those numbers, but one thing in your article that I also noticed in some of my research is that you had an escalation initially of the people being deported. And we'll just, since you talked about Haiti in particular in your article, it was a smaller number under Trump, and then it grew under Biden. But then your article, so that's one directionality, if you will. And then you see this article where you have this in your article, 211,000 Haitians are being brought into these work programs. So what I don't get is, what is it? Right? Are we reaching record levels of deportations? Are we reaching record levels of people being brought into special programs? I know you talked about a few things that you just outlined in terms of children and different things like that, but those two things just jumped out at me right away.
Well, I appreciate you bringing it up, because I think that does need a little clarification. As whenever you submit an article, some things do end up on the editor on the floor and don't make it into the published article. And there were a couple sentences that would have helped better understand that. So those numbers, those arrests are really indicative of the numbers as a whole coming across. The reason there were so few arrests ultimately and deportations under President Trump is because there were far fewer people coming across at the end of his administration than there are now. As I said, it's absolutely unprecedented, these numbers of people coming across, numbers in the actual millions. So what I was specifically, those arrests are indicative of the overall numbers of entrants. So what we have, maybe it would help if I backed up a little bit and kind of explained how we got here, how we got to what's going on in Springfield and, other towns like Charleroi in Pennsylvania and New York City. So if you go back to the primary in the 2020 election, all the Democratic candidates were asked, to raise their hand if they favored giving health care benefits to illegal aliens. And they all raised their hands in the affirmative. And President Biden at that time literally said he would welcome people to surge the border. And well, shortly after he took office and they saw that he ended a program called Remain in Mexico. I don't know how familiar you are with that, but it was a keystone of President Trump's attempts to protect the border. And what it essentially did was he cut a deal with Mexico that forced them to hold all the people coming through Mexico in Mexico, not allowing them to step foot in the country, because back in 1997, there was a court case called Flores versus Reno, which is, for those of us who are a little older, Janet Reno, then Attorney General of the United States. Well, what essentially came out of that was, what are you going to do with families, and in particular children and family members? You're going to separate them? Well, there's a period of time to where you either just, find one way to either move them along or move them out, or they have to be released into the interior. Remain in Mexico was a very elegant way to get around that. And what happened was, after the word got out, because these are really, when you think about it, these waves of humans, they're all connected. Everyone is communicating with people back in the home country, people here. And when they saw that they were being detained in Mexico, they really stopped coming. I was talking when I was down on the border last year, talking to a National Guardsman. He said it was amazing what he saw in terms of these holding camps that were full to capacity, all of a sudden dried up and no one was there. So that was a very successful element. And that was one of the first things that the Biden administration had gotten rid of. And the second thing was, you might recall, during the COVID crisis, there was a thing called Title 42. It wasn't an immigration statute, but it was a health and welfare statute, where if someone were found to be sick or ill, they could be speedily removed under Title 42. And we had been using that during COVID. And when that came off in 2023, there was a period where immigration was still down. But then, because Biden had announced they were going to get rid of Title 42, and then they were going to put in this thing called Get Tough measures. Well, after a month or two of them not getting tough, people began to surge the border again. And you were seeing instances where you might recall seeing news clips of a place called Eagle Pass in Texas. I mean, Elon Musk was down there, tens of thousands of people surging the border every day.
RFK went there too.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, who?
RFK was there.
Oh, yes,
also.
he did go there.
Well, do you think that, public opinion matters. Do you think that this is happening because a majority of the public thinks it's a good idea? Or is it because they don't like Trump and these are just Democrats who want to support the Democrat? You referred in your op-ed to a particular segment in a PBS report about one of the employers in Ohio who said the workers are better, the Haitian workers. He basically said that the U.S. workers are drugged out, lazy, they don't show up to work, so forth and so on. I don't know if he's telling the truth, but, if he is, that's not a bad argument. Let's take a look at that clip.
McGregor is the CEO of McGregor Metal, which makes welded parts for the auto and farm industries. Right now, about 10% of his workforce is Haitian, over 30 employees.
I wish I had 30 more. Our Haitian associates come to work every day. They don't have a drug problem. They'll stay at their machine. They'll achieve their numbers. They are here to work. And so in general, that's a stark difference from what we're used to in our community.
So he's saying the people of Springfield are lazy, drugged out. They may not even show up for work. What do you think? You think he's bullshitting, or you think maybe there's some truth to that?
The correct answer is it's complicated. And there is truth to what he's saying. We have roughly 7 million men of working age, that's between the ages of 25 and 55, who have stopped looking for work. This is bigger than the Depression. This is a real problem. So what's been causing it? We have to, I think, go back, because again, it's complicated. And I apologize for hitting the Wayback Machine. But, Ross
What are you,
Perot,
like Kamala Harris? You have to refer on notes. Come on, you're an expert.
yeah,
baby.
really.
Just talk to
I,
us.
I wear my United We Stand American lapel pin, and this is from the Ross Perot days. Ross Perot in 1992 talked about trade agreements like the North American Free Trade Agreement, World Trade Organization, Uruguay round of the general agreements on taxes and tariffs, and how these were pushing jobs overseas. And he called it the giant sucking sound.
Exactly.
Well, that hit American labor square in the face. I mean, these were good middle-class jobs. Jeff, you and I are probably about the same age. When I was a kid, I didn't have to go in the Army. There were plenty of jobs. Several small manufacturers in my town, do that for a stint, maybe get on with Bethlehem Steel, retire after 30 years. That was kind of the trajectory for most Americans. But those jobs were moved overseas. Initially, NAFTA had an impact to Mexico, but truth be told, by the time the ink was dry on NAFTA, those jobs were moving to Indonesia, the Philippines, and then with the WTO to China. I mean, by the year 2000, over 3 million manufacturing jobs had moved to China, and that hasn't stopped. That hasn't abated.
Kevin, one of our viewers here, H. Share, actually references the 2000s looking at Pennsylvania. And I think that's exactly what you're saying.
Yep.
And what we've also seen in that period is, because on the video he said, these workers come and they're not on drugs. We also had the whole opioid epidemic in the 2000s, which destroyed it further throughout Ohio and these other industrial states where they were just destroyed at an increasing rate.
Yeah, and the American workers haven't got a break. We've been talking essentially about blue-collar workers up to this point.
Doctors too, right?
Yep, doctors. Every year, 1,200 graduates of U.S. medical schools do not get a residency, hence they cannot practice medicine. However, 4,300 foreign-trained physicians get residencies at U.S. teaching hospitals. We have hundreds of thousands. Right now, there are about 1.9, about 1.9 mil, 1.3, 1.4 million foreign visa workers here in the United States working white-collar jobs. When we bring about 120,000 in on the H-1B visa alone every year, add to that optional practical training, which gives a 3-year employment authorization document to a foreign student who graduates with a STEM degree, and that's even bigger than the H-1B visa program. I mean, American labor is being outsourced, offshored, and just basically neglected.
Well, it's a good thing in that the Americans don't have hefty student loans to pay back.
Imagine being a doctor coming out of college with $300,000, $400,000 in student loans and not being able to get a job as a doctor. Imagine investing in a STEM degree. Only a quarter of people who get STEM degrees in the US actually work in science, technology, engineering, and math because they're simply being pushed out. They're either pushed out in the beginning because an employer, much like this employer, would rather hire a foreigner.
So wait, let me interrupt you.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that then we've reversed the outsourcing, we're now insourcing?
Good point.
We're doing both though.
Yeah, because as companies come back, because they're in Springfield, like Topper American, it's a part of a Japanese conglomerate. In the late 2016, 2017, they started to build a plant on what used to be the old International Harvester site in Springfield because it's got a great strategic location to Detroit and other places. Also, energy is a big deal. If we can get the cost of energy down, that's attractive to manufacturing because even more so than labor is the price of energy since so much is automated. So, yeah, I mean, there was a revitalization going on. The state gave tax benefits to companies they gave manufacturing tax credits to companies like Topper American and that employer that was on the PBS article or the PBS video clip. So they were incented to set up shop there. And now that we've done this. And Springfield, you have to remember, that's a town where there was all kinds of manufacturing going on, good jobs. But again, the offshoring just wiped it out, took it out at the knees. And so what are you left with? These browned out communities that, you have people that are destitute, working at Walmart for minimum wage with lousy benefits. You can't, and I think, you look at the opioid epidemic that you had mentioned, Ryan, you can't help but think it's this despair, this growing despair out there that is causing a lot of the harm. Because what do you got? Well, I can go down and work at the Sheetses and make, a little over minimum, lousy wages, the lousy food in our diet, the lousy wages. And if I want to get out, well, maybe I'll get a degree, but I'm going to get strapped with student loans. And who knows, maybe I'll graduate like many, and I'm going to be working as a barista at Starbucks. So
it affects a lot of different professions. And I want to ask you about all these offshoots you have. I mean, I think it's called Doctors Without Jobs. Right. Is that the name of it? Right.
Doctors Without Jobs.
And then you have U.S. tech workers. You have, I don't know if you still have progressives for immigration reform. It's like a different group for every subset of the immigration issue. Are you trying to stay one step ahead of the Southern Poverty Law Center so they don't put you on their hate list? They don't know which one of your groups
you are.
Yeah, I am there. I have a page dedicated to me on the Southern Poverty Law Center. I'm not a hate group. I'm an anti-immigrant group.
Yeah, can I throw in a headline I pulled about that really quick? So I came across this, and I came across the headline, read through the article, and then came down to the bottom, and I put this in here because I thought it was so interesting that at the bottom of the piece that is kind of going after you guys, it says that SPLC is a member of the International Labor Recruitment Working Group, which is specifically dedicated to that immigration policy. And I found that really interesting. I was interested in what your experience is with that. What's going on there?
Right. Samuel Gompers, who was the founder of what is now the AFL-CIO, and an immigrant himself, back in 1924, when testifying before Congress, said, anyone who looks to stem the flow of immigration is going to find themselves at odds with two groups. One group are the chambers of commerce that want a continually revolving door of labor, so that labor here is kept off kilter. They can't organize. You can always keep wages and benefits low. And the other group are the ethnic lobbies that want the doors kept open for more of their own countrymen. It gives them more political power. So that is something that is as old as it really starts back in the 1870s, because at that time, the average American was making about 85% more than the average European. It was good. I mean, labor was in short supply, wages were good. If you're willing to work, it was there.
Well, and that was the height of the labor union and kind of left.
Well, it was the post-Lincoln tradition.
I'm talking the 1870s. That's the beginning. Yes, right. That's where the populist movement started to begin. Because what we saw from the 1840s on, beginning with Irish immigration, large numbers. And of course, the gilded class loved it because they were providing the labor for this growing industrial base. When you look at the numbers, the growth that was going on, it really was amazing. Every year, gross domestic product rose and rose and rose, and even individual domestic product was rising. And we had great tailwinds.
Is that another way of saying standard of living? Standard
of living, yes.
For those of us uneducated people,
like Wiley was saying, so we ended into there was so much exploitation, and my family story I think is is emblematic of this. So
see, he is imitating Kamala Harris. Let's hear about your family. Let's hear about your family, and then when you worked at McDonald's.
Then when I worked at McDonald's, I only worked in food for a day, and I got fired. I'm just no good at it. So, but as weaknesses go, that's not a bad weakness to have. Well, in 1874, my great-grandfather Martinos Gelizelli, on my father's side, came from Lithuania. And he was one of the guys that arrived with the wooden shoes, destitute, and went to work in the coal mines of Pennsylvania, and eventually succumbed to black lung, but not before, continuing the old family line along. But now it was a bad time for immigrants. I mean, until really the populist movements that Wiley had talked about in the late 1800s, early 1900s, when we really began to see some good reforms going on and active unionizing and organizing that improved a lot of workers, it was a tough life. Now, contrast that to my mother, who came from Ireland in 1952. That year, we only let out 78,000 green cards. And there were no work permits, no employment visas. That was it. Because in 1924, the populists had forced through the Immigration Reform Act in 1924 that severely restricted immigration.
And I think a lot of that was because the corporations were actually using the immigrants to break strikes. Them partnered with the Pinkertons, who are actually killing workers. They were using, basically replacing anyone who was trying to bargain for these higher wages, because they made all these gains and they wanted to pull them back. So I just want to add that context.
Oh yeah, the Song of Joe Hill says it all. Yeah. I mean, they were killing workers. In Pennsylvania, you had the Hazleton Massacre, for instance, but it was the one time where, because you had the Irish and the Germans in the coal mines, and the Slavs from Lithuania, Poland, Eastern Europe were coming in to break the strikes, but they actually all joined together for the first time there, forming a united front. And again, it eventually led to some very restrictive laws. And as a result, I like to think we built the middle class. Certainly we had the singularity of a post-World War II world where we dominated everyone's economy. But I mean, it was a good time to be a much better time to be a worker. And certainly when my mother came, she, and they were serious about, if she were a burden financially, she could be deported, or her sponsor held pecuniary liable for her. I mean, we were very restrictive, very well regulated, and it worked. But unfortunately, in 1965, we liberalized our immigration system for all the right reasons, and with the proviso that we wouldn't increase the numbers. However, we did increase the numbers. And that's kind of where we got to where we are, let's say, pre-Biden. And with the Biden administration, as I had mentioned, their removal of Remain in Mexico, ending Title 42. So by December of 2023, over almost 250,000 people had rushed the border in that single month. Now, things are way down, and we can talk about that later, how that happened. But I mean, again,
but it's objecting to such a large influx is not racist. And it's kind of weird that people like you, I guess, have to deal with these allegations. I don't know how you object to this policy without being a racist in the eyes of some of these detractors. But I guess the measure of a man is, what those who know him best have to say about him. So let me ask you, how do your fellow KKK members feel about you? Do they feel you're
groovy, baby? Yeah.
All 20 of them.
All 20 of them with their tiki torches. But it's funny. You mentioned, Alex Nawastra over the Cato Institute, which is kind of our nemesis. They're this Koch brother funded think tank that is all for open borders.
Always have been, yeah.
He called me the Johnny Appleseed of anti-immigrant groups. And kind of like we were saying earlier, because I found myself, when I helped create this organization, it was at the time called Progressives for Immigration Reform. I was on the executive board of the California Democratic Party. I think this is probably when we started hanging out, Jeff.
Yeah, right. And it's when I'm like, progressive. I don't know. What do you mean by progressive? Yeah.
You were on the. I've been a member of California Democratic Party. I've been to those meetings.
Yeah.
I don't.
Were you on the e-board?
No, I did not. I did not run for e-board, but I've been a delegate. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was on e-board for a year. I ran the Pasadena Democracy for America.
Oh, DFA.
And
Yeah.
Jim Dean, Howard Dean's brother, said, you have the most effective organization west of the Mississippi. People running for office came to get our blessing. I mean, even Republicans, because we had a reputation for looking at the quality of the person running, because we were kind of fiscal conservatives, socially liberal. And so that I was a stalwart in the progressive movement there in Southern California. I mean, I used to hang out with Wiley Garrett, the progressive matriarch of Los Angeles, a lot. She was fun. I should write a book called Driving Miss Lila. But
you know that name, Wiley?
Yeah.
Yeah.
KPFK, the Pacifica radio station in Los Angeles. Yep. She's deceased now, but for many years she had a show until she was quite old.
Yeah, connect the dots. Yeah.
Yeah. And we did events with her. Scott Ritter and myself, we organized events with her, but she's definitely a piece of work.
So people's jaws drop when they say, wow, how could you have moved from being on the e-board, running Pasadena DFA, to being on the front page of the Southern Poverty Law Center as an anti-immigrant hater, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's really easy. My political views, my worldview hasn't changed one iota. I was always known as someone who wanted to restrict immigration. In fact, that's how this all got going. I was at a town hall and I started saying, look, okay, I'm a white cis male. Why am I in the Democratic Party? Well, it's labor, because I gave my family history and all of that. And then afterward, I'm getting my pizza and the head of the Irish caucus comes up to me and goes, I know what you were doing out there. And I'm like, what was I doing? He goes, I hate your stand on immigration. And if I could, I'd have you drummed out of this party. And I'm like, well, Tom, you can't. But this group we started, it was a collaboration with a former governor of Colorado, Dick Lamb, who was the longest serving governor of Colorado in Colorado's history. He was a Democrat, but equally loved and hated by Republicans and Democrats alike. And he said, look, we want to do outreach to the left. And unfortunately, I think we were probably a little too late for that. And so that's 2007. And then in 2017, I moved back to the East Coast. Our executive director wanted to move on. And I took over the organization thinking I would hire an executive director and then move on. But President Trump was in office. Immigration was front and foremost in everyone's mind. And I saw this area of employment visas, which kind of brings us back to Springfield and the jobs, as something that was really being overlooked, particularly when we look at employment visas and legal immigration and how that was impacting American workers.
Well, let's talk about Trump. You mentioned that you have an interesting, I guess, an evolution to your relationship with Trump. He started off by rebuffing you and even mocking you. Under one of the offshoots that we mentioned, U.S. Tech Workers, you put out a commercial and that got his attention. But prior to that, he actually mocked you on Twitter. There it is, right?
Yep, that's it.
And then cut to what, a couple of years later, and who is that sitting next to Trump to his left? That looks an awful lot like you.
That is me. And I'm there with 6 union workers of the Tennessee Valley Authority. Wow. The fellow handing Trump the letter is Mark Meadows, the chief of staff. And that was probably our high watermark as far as an organization goes to date. Because
to actually have an impact. I mean,
We saved 120 union information tech sector jobs that day. And in addition to that, Trump signed an executive order that I helped craft, and attorney John Miano, wherein they would form kind of a firewall around the federal government. And they were going to give these H-1B visa, employment visa companies, like Indian companies like Infosys, Tata, Mild Alma Mater, Ernst & Young, you couldn't work with the federal government if you were what they call H-1B visa dependents, or more than 15% of your workforce were H-1B foreign workers. And in these cases, it's up in the 80s. So that would have been a safe haven for American IT workers that have been getting pushed out across all of these sectors. I'll give you a great example, Disney. So Disney had an IT shop, a little over 100 workers. And one day they came in and said, look, we're going to outsource this shop to a company called HCL, an Indian-based consulting company.
I've worked with them for years.
Okay, you know.
Yes.
And they said, this is the deal. If you want severance, you're going to have to train your replacement for the next 6 months. Yeah. And they did it. And
HCL
they all got
is
terminated.
Massive. They're massive.
Oh, it's massive. That those guys, Infosys, Tata Consultancy Services. So that's what's been going on since 1990, since the Immigration Reform Act in 1990 that created the H-1B visa. That's what's been going on in various iterations. They've gotten much more clever since U.S. tech workers came on the scene, because if we were to get wind of a firing like that, we would get out to the company, meet with the workers, organize. So what they do now is like they did at Vanguard and CSX, the railroad company, is they call it rebadging. So one day you're working for Vanguard. The next day you're walking down the street to Infosys doing the same job, but working for Infosys. And that's what's been destroying our skilled workers.
Hold on.
Let's finish with Trump, though. I want to know how did it go from him mocking you to this? What happened?
Okay, so backing up, the story is I got a call one day from Jeff Sessions, who had left the White House team and was running for his old seat in Alabama. And he goes, I hear you know all about these H-1B visas. I'm like, well, a bit, Senator. And he goes, well, would you come down here and speak at a rally? And I went down, spoke at the rally, and there were TVA workers that were being outsourced there. And I'm talking to them. And the problem is that this is the first time I came in contact with a group like this that had a union. So you can get everyone in one place, get the word out and fight back. However, they had already waved the flag of surrender, saying, well, we're quasi-federal employees. We can't strike. It's done. So driving back up through the Shenandoah Valley, I got the idea that if I can get in front of Trump, he's the only one that can save these jobs. And we did the commercial. Now, the commercial was pretty cheap to make. I mean, we probably spent $6,000 on it. And but
let's play the commercial so people know what you're talking about.
That'll be fun. Okay,
yeah.
cool.
I also think, I mean, obviously people who don't agree with your point of view aren't going to get that enthusiastic about it. But aside from that, I really think, no, this is a really good example of how it doesn't always take a lot of money to really influence policy. And so hats off to you for doing that. Here's the commercial.
The highest paid federal employee in America lives here, right? Wrong. He lives in Knoxville. Jeff Lyash, CEO of Tennessee Valley Authority, made $8 million in total compensation last year. Yet, despite being America's highest paid federal employee, Mr. Lyash is firing TVA workers, outsourcing federal jobs to companies that use foreign workers. Ask President Trump to talk with his employee. Federal jobs should go to Americans, paid for by U.S. tech workers.
$6,000, well spent.
Well done.
$6,000.
Wow.
Well, the distribution cost me $100,000 around the TVA area and stations that President Trump watched. So,
Yeah.
And that's where he was watching he was watching Fox News.
When was that?
Came on and he blew a gasket. And I was actually having dinner with my attorney in Alexandria that night, and my phone starts blowing up. And someone gets a hold of me and says, oh my God, Trump just tweeted you. He called you fake news.
Wow.
But the cool thing was a lot of people, like even Ann Coulter, were hitting him back saying, you need to be talking to these guys. And then a really wonderful guy who was working in the White House at the time, Theo Wald, bright guy, reached out to me and said, hey, can you set up a rally in Knoxville? I'm like, yeah. And then he's like, can you bring people to DC? And that's how this all got started. It It was a big risk on my part. It was a big risk on, someone like the part of Theo Wall to bring in an unknown into the White House, into the cabinet room.
So this person, what's his name again?
Theo Wald.
Is he the one who was most responsible for
Yes.
getting Trump to see the light?
Yep.
Yeah. And what was Trump like when you went in there? Because people say all these things about him. Give us the inside scoop. Is there any difference between the public Trump and the behind the scenes Trump? In particular, does he really act like you would want a president to act? Does he listen? Does he conduct a meeting in a good way? Give us the scoop.
Okay. This is great because I didn't vote for President Trump in 2016. I voted for Jill Stein as a protest vote, but I campaigned for him in 2020. And I mean, I put a lot of time and effort into his campaign. But the way it started, we go into the cabinet room and we're sitting down, and through a side door, Trump and Pence walk in, and everyone stands up, and Trump walks right by me, sits down. First thing he does is look over at me and go, "You need to move down." All they're going to say is we weren't social distancing. So here I am on the couch. And what was great about him is he was large and in charge. Because I've seen, people handle presidents before. Oh, it'll be this and this. He's like, okay, all right, everyone listen up. In a few minutes, the fake news is going to come in. And if anything good happens, no one's going to hear about this. And it was like, we're busting a gut. And he's talking to this guy. Oh, yeah, because there's a Congress. Oh, yeah, how's the family, all this? And da-da-da. So then the news comes in, and he starts rolling, and he reads the executive. He fires the chairman and one of the directors of the TVA. And then he reads the executive order, signs it. And then he starts going around the table, starting with me, to talk to the workers. Everyone had their little elevator spiel that they were going to give. And during my spiel, I had mentioned the commercial. And he looked at me and goes, "Oh, you're the one that did that commercial. That commercial really made me angry, but you made me think." And, at that point, I just said, and I was absolutely sincere, because I said, "Mr. President, I had to do the commercial because you were the only one that could and would save these jobs." And because he's a problem solver.
Play right to the ego too. That's
You
get him.
Is this why Mike Pence was scowling?
Actually, Pence was funny too. Because you have this image of him. He's very straight-laced. When we had finished, and I'll tell you something I did just before everyone finished. So they were finished and they walk out, and you look at them as they're going. Pence wheels around, punches me in the chest, and he goes, that commercial had us talking for 3 days. We didn't know what to do with it. And it was jovial.
That's what you would want. That's what you would want. You would want people to have real debate and discussion. That's fantastic. Yeah, but I don't really understand why Trump was so opposed to it at first. What do you think?
Well, initially it just hit him wrong. It was designed to irritate him a bit.
Well, you called him out
because he had said in his campaign in 2016, he literally, the woman in the red dress to the right, Sarah Blackman, attorney who had been representing workers at Disney. He knew Sarah.
That one right there, right?
And so he knew Sarah. He knew what was going on. He pledged to do something about this, and he hadn't up until then. And the cool thing was he did do something. As I'd mentioned, Remain in Mexico is working great, but white-collar worker Americans are getting trashed by the H-1B visa program. Well, Cuccinelli and Scalia pulled me aside afterward and pretty much said, "Look, you got to be patient because we have this rule change, and this rule change. And this is going to defang H-1B." And I'm like, "That's great. It will." Problem is, President Trump needs a second term to make sure that all this gets enacted. And we don't go through the old sue and settle routine. But they had actually fixed the problem. And that's the big difference between a Trump as president and anyone else. He can think for himself, and he's got a fine mind. So,
there's one thing I want to bring up here, which strikes me, and I almost feel like well, Wiley, you have done some research on Haiti. There's some things that I thought about because originally, right, your article was about Haiti, and we've covered a number of things, and some of the questions in the chat are from people saying, well, don't immigrants account for a pretty substantial part of the national GDP? And then we looked at people being thrown out, people coming in, NAFTA, taking jobs overseas, and now, this insourcing again. So one thing that I think about from this, and maybe Trump gets this, maybe he doesn't, is the question of the national economy. What's good for the entire nation? It's not really, get rid of those Haitians because they're eating our pets. Think about one thing that you didn't mention. 2021, the president of Haiti was assassinated, total chaos. And then a month later, horrific hurricane. And to this day, nothing's been done. It's just become a no man's land. And, it's like if you've got a flesh-eating virus or something like that on your body, you can't just say, well, I'm going to make sure my teeth are brushed, and I'm going to be fine. You do have your neighborhood. And Haiti historically does have a tie to the American Republic, even with people like Marquis de Lafayette and many others who came and fought in the American Revolution through Haiti. So it is kind of our neighborhood. And yet we need to reindustrialize ourselves. So
Can I dig into a little bit of the history of Haiti? Is it cool if I do that really quick? Okay. So yeah, because I found this really interesting. I will say I'm far on the left. So the perspective I bring is going to maybe be a little different than, we all kind of have different political alignments here. But my concern with all of this stuff is continuously just the cycle that America is creating through its policy. I'll start with this guy. Because I do think we have a policy problem. I just think that the policy problem is less about the border and more about American corporations and our government going in and overthrowing other countries' governments and causing absolute chaos and destitution. So I started with this WikiLeaks cable where it's talking about the coup that Ryan was actually, that's not the coup you were speaking about. You were speaking about the shooting, which is also us. But before that, in 2004, when they ousted Aristide, it was very much done because Fruit of the Loom, Hanes, and Levi's, who got all their clothes sewed there, did not want to raise the wages of the workers who were making 9 cents an hour. And they literally refused to get it up to 62 cents an hour, or like $5 a day. So to start to put the context of where this stuff is coming from. So a little bit on Haiti's history. I just put a really summary thing together. So basically, at the beginning, of course, it's colonized by the Spanish and the French, but then when they get their independence, they have the first colonial revolution in the world, and they get their independence, but it is imposed upon them with $21 billion of debt. And that is done by the US and by France and by all the colonial nations basically are part of this. So they say, okay, we're losing money, so you have to pay us reparations. And to do that, you're going to borrow high interest loans from the United States. It was about 80% of the country's annual national budget and 10 times the annual revenue that they were extracting from that country to pay back France because they didn't own them anymore.
Until you say 1947.
1947 was the last year they were paying. But then America moves in. And this is kind of the point where America starts taking over a lot of the colonial holdings of other countries coming out of World War II. And because they got involved with the debt when France was there. So America comes in and occupies the island from 1915 to 1937. They send in Trujillo, who kills like 30,000 Haitians. Trujillo was like another puppet government that we installed when we removed a leftist in Latin America. Then you have the US-backed dictatorships of the Duvaliers, Francois, and then his son, who come in. They have death squads. They're keeping American interests in line, basically, because so many American companies are invested there at that point.
Papa
And then
Doc
you have
and Baby Doc.
yeah,
What's that?
yep,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I actually took that out because I was like, I don't even.
People may not
Then
get it.
yeah, no, that was their nicknames. Yeah,
Ah.
and then you have the 1987 through 88. There's basically these military-run elections, so they're going into them, and a bunch of the leaders who would be more left-wing get assassinated. Then you have the military-run elections, and all this again is under the United States. Like this is like CIA.
Well, these are
involvement
the
heavily.
white shoe boys. The
Right, the white shoe mafia. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's not the United, because even the leader Jean Villebrun Guillaume, I can't even say, Sam. You said he was leftist. These, whether they were left or not, they were nationalists. They were for their country.
Yes.
I
But they
just
are
want to
left,
make that
and it's
point.
important to understand that they are left because left is the workers.
No,
whereas
it's
left
true.
is
It's
the right.
true. But Kennedy did
yeah.
not associate, he didn't say, I'm with them, other than to say, we can work with them because they're for their country, I'm for my country, and it's better that we work and have good relations than be at loggerheads all the time. Whereas the white shoe boys were like, let's nuke them and take everything.
Yeah, and I think what we're talking about is colonialism. We're talking about neocolonialism.
Yeah, he was
this
against
was
that.
more traditional colonialism. Yeah, exactly. But Kennedy is left.
And the death
so
squads were
that's back
just
when we kind of had a vague.
Well, I'm just saying I'm not a leftist. I'm
I
a
know.
George Washington, Abraham Lincoln nationalist, but it happens to be also an anti-colonial tradition.
Yeah, and Ryan and I constantly have these conversations because we both like Kennedy and we both approach it from a very different
Completely
perspective.
different, yeah.
So it's like a very interesting thing. But then then Aristide comes in, and he was like the first one who went through like an officially democratic process. He gets the 67% of the popular vote. And then we coup him. And they coup him twice. So they coup him out once. And it's because he's not supporting the desires of the U.S. corporations and the interests. Then they bring him back in, forcing him to, do a bunch of things like hand over all of the agricultural production rights to the U.S. And I have some stuff on that later. But like, then you have. Basically, he starts coming out and trying to raise the minimum wage, which was that article I started with, defying the small government dogma that the United States imposes when they give loans to like the IMF and World Bank. And then trying to raise the wages of the clothing workers, increasing government investment in education and healthcare, and he starts speaking out against the $21 billion that are being paid back. They coup him again. Then there's the hurricanes. Then there's the tropical storms. Then there is the earthquake and the cholera. And this is where you have the Clinton Foundation in there ripping all of the financial backings out of the country at this point. And basically taking and just pocketing all of the money that's supposed to go to rebuild. And it causes absolute chaos. The United States has not allowed another like clean process really to happen. And we're so involved with this stuff because these companies I think Naomi Klein's book on disaster capitalism would probably be like the best point of reference for what happens in that period of time. And then you have Hurricane Matthew in 2016, and that leads up to the assassination in 2021, which was done by people who are tied to the DEA and military trained, and it kind of fits the same profile of all these coups, which leads to right now, where there is currently no government elected, and the United States has just sent in Jamaican troops to shut down the groups who are trying to organize to get their democracy back in line. They're trying to fight to get back
Prime Minister
towards the
resigned
Aristide.
too recently
And
also.
and when people start getting assassinated and you have stuff like that and you have the pressure coming in, like, yeah, it's pure chaos. So that leads us back into that. So I guess these were a couple of quotes off of a geopolitical economy report. It was a great interview with Max Blumenthal, Michael Hudson, and Ben Norton. And basically they're talking about the policy, which is like making Latin America, African and Asian countries export plantation crops, and then primarily like keeping the World Bank keeps them from using their own food resources and things for themselves, and it just creates this disaster. So I just wanted to put that context into why people are fleeing Haiti. Right now, we have been arming right-wing militias, and now we've sent in the Jamaicans. So like the crisis is going to continue if that economy can't be stabilized and they can't get the same types of things we're working
That seems to be what our foreign policy should be, is to build up these countries south.
You would think so.
Yeah.
You're familiar with Henry Wallace. He was vice president. He wrote a book, and I still have it on my shelf back there,
I love
called
Wallace.
A Million Jobs. And in it, he talked about how he had attempted prior to World War II starting that they were going to need the resources of Latin and South America. So this is what we should do. We should go in, build up their infrastructure so that after the war, we will have strong trading partners. They'll be able to stand on their own. We'll have these strong, this hemisphere will be much more economically sound and safer and led by America, unlike, just the Monroe Doctrine. But that was his vision. Unfortunately, like he said, it didn't survive. For that time, the Republicans who were holding they wouldn't allow it to happen. But that's the kind of guy William Wallace was. And I believe because was that kind of guy, we ended up with Harry Truman and not him as the VP in FDR's last administration.
And that was such a coup when they remove him. He was such a good, Henry Wallace was great. And that's really where we kind of head down that very colonial path.
So does Trump understand this, what you're saying? I don't think I've ever heard him talk in these terms.
No, Trump understands. I mean, the fact that he appointed guys like Lighthizer and Navarro. Lighthizer was the U.S. trade representative. Navarro was working trade deals. What these guys did was amazing in terms of beginning to reverse what had been happening with the outsourcing and the offshoring. So yes, Trump absolutely knew what he was doing because, again, he appointed the right people. So for, when you look at trade, unfortunately, it took him 3.5 years to get immigration right. But when he did, it was very effective.
But Kevin, also you have with RFK coming on the team, now I hear even Trump discussing, hey, the idea that spending on the war economy, for i.e., arming Ukraine indefinitely and every other war, because one of the arguments is, well, this creates jobs here. We're not really spending the money in Ukraine, right? Yeah. This idea of ending that and bringing these people back and building the nation. Alicia made the point, China is building all over the world. Now, I don't know.
China's business is business. Our business is war.
Yep.
At the end of the day.
So
there it is. Yeah.
I wrote this very briefly. It was very short in preparation for this discussion. Make Haiti the next Japan. Maybe I should have said make Haiti the next Guangzhou. But I did put in here, I don't know if you can see this map. We don't have the capacity to build a Haiti right now. China does. Actually, Haiti cannot work with, China can't work with Haiti right now because Haiti doesn't recognize China. Actually, they only recognize Taiwan. But deal maker Trump and Bobby have been saying, well, Russia, we should make deals with them. We should get peace. China, we should make, they even said Iran. I've heard it. People don't know. They have definitely said it. But I could foresee with pressure from that, say, Henry Wallace, Kennedy tradition in Americans, right? Putting the pressure on them to return to that tradition so that, as I said in the article briefly, we could, as a joint project, like China has the Belt and Road, we could build a place like Haiti and use that as a mechanism to rebuild our internal industry. Because I would just say to some people who are immigrating en masse to the United States aren't doing it because they really want to. They feel desperate, as Wiley was saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they would rather stay home if it was better.
Many are economic migrants. We have the number of actual, like right now, this
but if it was working better there, they wouldn't.
Well, the problem is, you had kind of touched on these two paradigms that seem to preoccupy U.S. foreign policy, and that is the debt and death paradigm and the invade and invite paradigm. This is classic neoliberalism, the movement of people, goods, and capital across international borders to maximize profit for a few and beggar the rest. And we need to, because you're really onto something, Ryan. It's a mindset that has to change. Not, everything else will follow. And kind of speaking of mindset, it's going to sound a little off base, but look how Trump felt about architecture, like bringing back federalist architecture, older architecture, versus what we saw after World War II, this brutalist. You look at all the federal buildings, they're pillbox. They look like
Nazi
pillboxes.
Germany, frankly.
Yeah, exactly. Brutalist. You're small, not big. That's a mindset. And if you can capture that and say, I want my environment to smile back at me when I'm out walking around in it, that's a mindset. And people like Trump, I think, can accomplish that.
It's political theater for sure, but I'm wondering if it could be more than political theater if Trump were to go to Springfield, Ohio, which he said he's going to do, but now there's some question about whether or not he really is going to. Do you think that would be a good idea? Because maybe it would, lead to some concrete improvements.
I would be concerned with his safety in a place like Springfield at this point. That's just, me having knowing nothing, but I think it's important because Springfield is the epitome of this return of manufacturing coming back on shore. And now that it's finally coming back on shore, it's like, yeah, that guy has 30 Haitian employees he really likes. Can he find another 30? Maybe not. But they have 20,000 Haitians sitting in this town, literally sucking up all the resources. I sent you a graphic of the wellspring of federal, state, and local benefits that are being accessed by Haitians. It's over 8,000 right now in Clark County in Springfield.
Well, you're talking about his safety. I think he has to worry about safety anywhere where he's just kind of like out on the streets.
Like in Pennsylvania recently.
Yeah.
But if it's a controlled environment, it doesn't really matter whether he's in Ohio or Florida or Pennsylvania or anywhere if it's a controlled environment, right?
Well, you actually have his ear. I'm interested in
he doesn't. I talked to him that one day.
By extension, we're presidential advisors because we know Kevin. So
Right.
Although I will say this.
We're
Get
your
into
team.
it, Wiley.
We're your team.
I'll interject them, Wiley, please.
Let Wiley use her influence. That's why we do this, because we want to influence.
Back in July, he did a podcast, the All In podcast, with 4 Silicon Valley billionaires. And I didn't know who this was. He's talking about staple a green card to a diploma, take it down to the junior college level, and these billionaires are clapping because they're thinking we're going to get all the cheap H-1B labor we want. And I raged, and we did a tweet. And the tweet was simply this. In 2016, President Trump said this. In 2024, he said this. That one tweet got 1.5 million views. And the shitstorm, excuse my language, it set off over 2.4 million. Like, there was a point where his communications director of the campaign was backpedaling, trying to say that's not what he said. And I'm like, no, that's damage control you're trying to do. That got like 600,000 views. It just went bananas. And, people are, I think there's a point where we have to cut him a bit of slack because there's a thing called electioneering and they got to do the electioneering.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because I've been involved in politics. I know if you can take $1 from someone else and get them to give it to you, they actually have to raise $2. And the same with the votes and everything. So, yeah. But I suppose, our U.S. tech workers page, we have a really, really high engagement rate on it. It's over 5.6%. We only have about 23,000 followers. But, prior to the Musk era, they were all blue checks. And anyone who wanted to know about employment visas would always be there checking us out. So,
all right, let's not forget Wiley wants to be a presidential advisor. How do you want to influence things?
I guess so. To me, I think that to deal with the issue altogether, you're also talking about a transformation in foreign policy. And I'm going to put this little guy up here. Because the U.S. and the businesses go in and destroy these countries, you end up with this cycle, and they're doing it for the corporations to drop the cost of labor, which is exactly what they do when they bring them in our country. And it creates this cycle that just screws workers all the time. The people who benefit from it are so small. And I guess my question is, when you're talking with him about it, do you guys discuss that part of the policy that would actually help keep corporations here because they aren't overthrowing other governments to guarantee low wages? And
I wouldn't know because I only met him that one day, and I've tangentially talked to people who were on the staff and in the campaign on occasion. But I will say this: there is an amazing transformation going on in the Republican Party. The
complete
new
realignment.
Conservatism movement is, you have groups like Orrin Cass. He has an amazing group called American Compass. There are so many bright lights that have basically said, no, it's not okay to screw over American workers to increase profit. There's a reason for an economy, a national economy. And as a result, you have like Riley Moore. He was the state treasurer for the state of West Virginia. He's going to secure the congressional seat for West Virginia in this upcoming election because he's won the Republican primary. He's been endorsed by half a dozen unions. He's a Republican.
Interesting.
Because they get it. There's this
with
change going on. Yeah, Massey, same thing. Although Massey, I love Massey, but boy, he needs to see religion on a thing called E-Verify. E-Verify is a way that you can check to make sure someone is legal to work. You look at the I-9s and compare that to other documents. And it's a quick and easy way for employers to verify the work status of an immigrant. But he looks at it as a stalking horse on privacy. And he almost endangered the passage of House Bill HR 2, which was an immigration restrictionist bill, simply because, and they had to pull E-Verify out of it. But boy, I'd love to either sit with him or sit with people that talk to him and really kind of understand what he thinks E-Verify is, and if we can change his mind on
Well,
that.
the problem
I'm sorry.
is
Go ahead, Ron. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, privacy is a very big deal to people, and everything is conflated and confused because it is back to what Wiley was saying, where you have this small minority who are basically asset stripping everybody, but those people have been in the government. So even the question of the traditional conservative thing that the government is too big, even that has changed, because the question is not really so much size, but who the hell is in the government? Oh, it turns out it's all of these corporations who don't have they don't feel like they have loyalty to the United States.
Correct. Yes.
Exactly. And that's the thing. We all come from different perspectives, but we all can see that.
You know what though? You have the
agree.
Rosie the Riveter shirt on. So.
Yeah.
I have Rosie the Riveter with a keffiyeh. Dude, this is another Palestine shirt. I will wear one every day. Get ready for them. They will always be here. So, no, that's
I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of that person you said who was your contact that persuaded Trump. Say that name again.
Theo Wald, W-O-L-D.
W-O-L-D. Theo Wald. Is he still in Trump's inner circle?
He's running Pacific Northwest operations for the campaign.
Okay, great. So if Trump is elected, then there's a good chance that you might still be able to impart some influence, right?
No comment.
What do you mean, no comment? Why not?
Well,
that's what you're taught to say. Are you going to
be
part of that administration?
All right, I'll ask you the question in a different way. Do you know anybody else who is likely to be part of the Trump administration?
Yes, several in the immigration area. Yes, I do.
All right.
I think it's incumbent, and I hope people who are watching this, because Project 2025 got a really bad rap. What they were doing was something really incredible. They were creating an opportunity for people outside the Beltway to look at positions that are in what they call the plum book. So there are roughly 4,300 appointees that are made by the new administration. The president makes these appointees.
Right.
And some of that, they typically range anywhere from a GS-13 up to an SES-1. And SES-1 is like, 4-star general grade in the civilian service. And that's, at the end of the day, that's only 0.02% of the whole federal 2 million workers. And these are the people that are going to be charged with pushing the president's agenda in that administration. And they're going to talk about a deep state. They're going to find themselves, as every administration knows, beset by all kinds of forces that don't want to see this change. The way they've been doing things since the end of World War II, they're not going to react well to an America First agenda. They're not going to react well to an anti-neoliberalism agenda. But I would say, everyone, go out, find the plum book online, look for positions you think you're going to be qualified for. Pull down the form F-86. It's 120 some pages. Start filling it out now, so that when this administration, if President Trump is elected, there will be a transition team.
Right.
And during that transition is when you can reach out and say, here's my stuff. This is what I want to do. Can I help?
This is exciting. We can actually be part of this. Ryan's wife works for RFK. And if RFK is involved, then there's another pathway we have. Wiley, what do you want what position do you want in the administration?
I mean, if I'm choosing, I'd take the foreign policy side of this. I'd love to stop this coups, man. That would be great. No, but I did want to bring it back to something you said, though, Kevin, because you called out, and I think it's accurate, that the Democrats have become the party of war, that it is a war party. And I want to highlight, my concern around why I think some of this is happening, because I don't really buy the Democrats' line that the reason for this is, I'm sorry, I just don't see them being quite the charitable, loving, open people that they claim that they are. They work for large corporations.
Wiley, you're a racist for saying that.
And here's why I'm going to say that I'm not. Because what do we know that they're aiming at, right? They have said we need to prepare for war with China by 2027. That has been openly said by this administration. I think a lot of people overlook the first year you talk about the liberalization of the immigration policy is during the Vietnam War in 1965. We're about halfway through. It's not going well. The United States has a policy that if you immigrate to the United States, you are required to sign up for selective service, a thing that they have been trying to pass again. It includes undocumented workers. And what it does, so you can see here that anyone who's coming in basically, as soon as you come in, it applies to naturalized citizens, parolees, undocumented immigrants, legal permanent residents, asylum seekers, and refugees. It applies to everyone. And we know they're not hitting their quotas. We know.
They're way off.
Yeah, and like
Not even
50% of
close.
young men today don't even physically qualify for the military.
Yeah. So this was something that Bush passed. This is also saying that you get citizenship if you join the military. It's like a workaround to
It's
get
been around.
citizenship quickly. It's been around. That's what I'm saying. This is from
Yeah,
2002.
yeah.
But I also want to call out that when you sign up for selective service, hold on, is this the one we were looking for? No. Will you get citizenship? As it turns out, if you go and serve and you have all these people here who are undocumented, you have this ability to draft them in and then give them blanket amnesty once they've fought your wars.
Wow.
And I really want to highlight this is happening because a few weeks ago, there was an article where Israel is talking about the fact that they are offering citizenship to immigrants for fighting in the IDF. And I am telling you, I think this is
Probably going on in Ukraine too, by the way.
Definitely would assume so.
I mean, it's sort of it's a, what do you call it? It's like a cookie cutter thing when you're talking about these policies that are being implemented. It's no different.
Well, and Ukraine started offering up anyone who had like family heritage there, which by the way would be me. I have relatives who still live in Ukraine, to send them off to be ground up for, I don't know, American Russia or whatever.
It's cannon fodder.
It's cannon fodder. And that's, I just want to call that out very clearly because
but it's interesting where these things never happen in a well-functioning republic. I mean, if you go back to Rome before 82 BC, which is roughly the time when this guy Marius was proconsul, to be in the Roman military, you had to be not just enfranchised, but a property owner, because these people all came from the farms. I mean, Rome was kicking ass with farmers, in their, they were all people who owned land. And the guys who ran the military had all come from the ruling classes. That was the expectation. But they had gone through several military setbacks with the Germans and the Gauls. And they were forced to, this guy Marius said, all right, tell you what, I'm just going to go recruit the poor and teach them to be soldiers. And that's how they really built the empire, because they were able to expand the military to do these things.
They also created this ring, the Limes region of walls, and they just would, when things weren't going right, they would just push that boundary out further to maintain that. And then it just became out of control to maintain.
But tell me if I'm wrong, Kevin, didn't it also ultimately destroy them? Because
Absolutely.
my understanding is that's actually what.
Because what happened was, too, they had, much like we've come to rely on immigrant labor. I mean, I grew up digging ditches, shoveling horse shit, cow shit, dog shit, for a living and working.
Did you wear shit kickers, by the way?
I wore shit kickers. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Rubber, boots when you're out mucking stalls. But that work is now seen, there's immigrants that will do it. And that's nuts. I mean, that's it. And now it's, when they're saying, okay, government's going to create these jobs, but they have to go to citizens now. It's no different in Rome when they're saying we're going to create jobs, but slaves can't hold them, because you have again, they had the same thing. We have 7 million young men, as I had mentioned, of working age that aren't in the workforce. They had their large proportion of men in the workforce, participate in the workforce. So yeah, it creates a lot of bad consequences. There's a lot of bad consequences to this, and it's a counter virtuous cycle that happens.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. And I feel like it's a race to the bottom for workers in these other places too, because they're trying to rise up and build their own country. When America comes in and does this, the programs, we basically make work jobs. We come in and give people all these roles so that they will then help overthrow the government or direct, everyone in this audience probably understands what happened in Ukraine because everyone talks about it so much, but very similar things happened in Haiti. And you have them building schools, doing all these things just to control things. They create all of these jobs, but then if they win the coup, then all the wages stay low, so people end up migrating out because there isn't you have no ability to move up because you're stuck under the boot of capital. Or if you lose the coup, all the people we paid, all the people who worked for us are traitors, and they will have to come to America, and that consistently happens as well. So no matter what, you're draining the young people, the talent. It's like a brain drain that gets created on those countries as well.
Yeah, and very similar to Mexico.
Cycle.
Like there was a Mexican lament, and it went, "Oh, poor Mexico. So close, so far from God, so close to North America," because there's an amazing movie, and it came out probably 10 years ago, maybe 9 years ago, called Los Angeles. And the director got a degree in ethnology from Berkeley and lived among a village in one of the like Chiapas or something like that for several years. And he did the movie there. And it was about the problem there is all the men go to North America, leaving basically the gangs to run the village. So,
which were also the ones funding.
Precisely. Yeah. Exactly. And so this is I meant to say the term I was looking for was destructive cycle. This mass immigration.
Right.
It was great for a while, like in the 80s with Ireland, a country that had been losing its young people for generations, finally was able to, like Intel put a semiconductor plant there because the education system was still strong. So they were able to reinvigorate that. It became one of it was called the Celtic Lion for a period of time. Then they mucked it up, but
they're working on it again.
They are.
I'm interested to see what happens.
But yeah, it's, to me, we have, as I mentioned before, you have the invade and invite paradigm because, okay, the neoliberals don't care about this. So what's the breakage? Well, a handful get to come to the U.S. then as a consolation prize for us, taking them off their farms, stripping them of their enfranchisement with their government and everything, and running things into the ground basically, on the promise of economic growth. You reminded me. I don't know if you guys have read those books, Confessions of an Economic Hitman.
Of course, I mean, Wiley and I have been talking about that topic for some time. Yeah.
Yeah. We're very
but in this whole thing, it's happening internally and externally. So in that sense, I just want to emphasize that it's like Trump is getting an education in defending his own country, and then he's saying, well, let's work with these other countries. But you do see, with all the sanctions against Russia, their internal economy is skyrocketing. The Belt and Road with China has been around now for a number of years, and we were originally invited to participate so that we could be one of the engines of developing the world. And that, you talked about the 1870s, the tradition of Lincoln and McKinley was build the world. Use what we did with the Transcontinental Railroad, use what John Quincy Adams had with building canals, what Alexander Hamilton did with national banking to fund, some of it public, some of it private, building the nation, increasing the standard of living, and you export that as a concept to other countries, and you work with them to do that. We did that even with Russia. Before and after the revolution, International Harvester was over there with the help of the United States building truck factories. And you had some of that with Roosevelt. Kennedy wanted to do that. Really, to the day, I mean, I do see that potential exists now. But we haven't decided which way we're going to go in the United States, I'm saying. It's like we're on the cusp of either total destruction or a paradigm shift. That's how I see it, because the pressure with
But
BRICS.
no one's aiming for what we're talking about. That's
no,
what
but we
scares
have
me,
to
because the
expand this
liberals
conversation.
are
Yeah.
But
totally
I think,
the war party now. So what do you do?
But look at BRICS. BRICS is this is what BRICS wants. I don't know if they know how to do it. What we have to do is get the United States to participate.
Well, but they have to
but
participate
we
in a way
have to
that's not exploiting.
yes, we have to
What's that?
participate as equals, and we're not.
Of course.
We're
We're
not
not
willing
prepared
to.
for that. We're not willing to do
Well,
that.
I mean, we're willing.
Yeah. We have to take the
Well, we got to
equal-
make sacrifices. I'm willing to overlook my hatred of Washington, D.C., to move there in order to hang out with you guys and actually influence the future of the human species. So
One thing I
let's
would
do it.
highlight is just the difference. Like, you were talking about Confessions of an Economic Hitman. So they go in and do these predatory loans, and then a part of that is the forced austerity, though. I think the key is getting rid of the people who are enforcing austerity at home and abroad.
Well, those are the IMF
Because that-
conditionalities.
Exactly, but that's all neoliberal. That's and
Of course.
neoconservative.
Yeah, and it's
right.
the dollar. It's because it's the reserve currency. We will prop that
That's
up
gonna end soon.
and it
But
could very well end soon. It won't be good for us, but I think in the long run it'll be healthy, because
I think so.
again, we had this singularity after World War II where we were just the economic engine of the world. Now, eventually, by 1953, Japan had recovered to post or pre-World War II levels of GDP growth and things like that. And they were able to compete successfully with us in a lot of industries. But we have to navigate a world where, one, we can't be the hegemon, good or bad. Because one of the things that went with being the hegemon was we kept the lines of the oceanic lines open for trade across the world. We used to stomp out issues, kind of be the world policeman. That was probably one of the benefits. So we got everyone to sign into this economic deal with us. We'll do that. You can lower your defense spending. We'll absorb those costs. We'll let you trade into our country. But I think what we have to do now is realize we are in a multipolar world where we're going to have to play with a little bit of honor and integrity, and not clutch our pearls when they're doing what we do on a daily basis of pushing our own agenda forward. And to that, we will need a real change of administration. And I'm just hoping we can get there. There will be huge temptations to, regardless of who goes into office, to pull back and just continue with the status quo. But in the long run, I think that is will be detrimental to the country. I'd rather have pain now for about 5-6 years, survive it, and then have a real republic, a functioning republic.
How do you feel like Trump fits into? I guess that's my question. It's like, I can't tell if either of these sides are hopeful in any way. I feel very.
I see him as being iconoclastic in that respect. So in that way, he'll be perhaps successfully able to tear things down to the extent where someone will come along and, rebuild. And hopefully, again, we will realize the error of our neoliberal ways and globalist ways. And, look at global steel production. Look at that.
I mean, just to your point, we had talked about this on a previous show. China overtook us a long time ago. And, I think I had this other one here. This is from the American Society of Civil Engineers and their report card. I was floored by this, that it took us 20 years to go from a D+ to a C-. Okay, we passed.
And where is the striving for excellence? And part of this is we built out this huge infrastructure built around the automobile, don't you think? It's a difficult, expensive infrastructure to maintain.
And so many people, like, when it comes to it's like the stripping now. It's like they hit the maximum of what the people at the very top and the shareholders felt they could take out. So they're just ripping out the base of at least that's what I've seen working in LA in media and in some of the Silicon Valley companies. Because
you're against freedom, Wiley.
You're right. I'm against the freedom of. So I guess
The
one
freedom to take the money out of
freedom to
your
steal
wallet
our
and put
money.
it into my wallet.
and to fire workers and do. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I'm
Oh,
not.
no. They're not
for
being fired. They're
freedom.
being freed.
Freed.
Well, it's interesting you
income.
say that, Wiley and Ryan. Are you familiar with Catherine Austin Fitz? She runs a group called Solari Report. You know, she was a whistleblower back during the George H. Administration, eventually prevailed, got enough money to go do her thing. And she said that something happened. The shift came in the late 80s where, and she attributes it, I don't know if she's right or wrong, to when negotiations to restructure Social Security fell apart because it was going bankrupt eventually. And the powers that be pretty much said, we're no longer going to invest in this country and we're going to move it all out. And I'll tell you, it's pretty obvious that's what happened.
Yeah.
We may not know the why, but it certainly has happened.
Well, they certainly get more profit, I think.
No doubt about it.
By
yeah, it's a profit-making machine.
Yeah.
And the heck of it is, you know, so we fund the Chinese elite who send their kids here. I was talking to one kid a few years ago, and his parents are telling him, buy the Maserati, because who knows what will happen with this regime next year. We could be hung or something, but go. And I'm thinking to myself, that's the salaries that went into paying people working in manufacturing here. They've now all gone overseas. And the sad thing is, you know, which is, you know, I'm ecstatic having this conversation with the three of you, because 2 Saturdays ago, I went to the annual gala for I still have the invite here, for the National Museum of Industrial History
cool.
in Bethlehem,
Where's that?
Pennsylvania. It's in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
Bethlehem.
And and it's actually built on, you know, one of the ruins of the factory there. And I gotta say, I was really disappointed, because I would have these conversations with people and they would look at me like I'm from Mars. To have this conversation we're having now. Yeah. And like one guy literally said his wife was working there, and he goes, that's not really a safe thing to say.
That's the problem with the way that neoliberals have taken these things that they're not doing for good reason, but framed them in a way where they connect it to people's identity of being a good person and what is like sayable. And that is so dangerous. Like, I cannot emphasize how dangerous I find that to be.
Let's take it one step further, because I've had some discussions. So Scott Ritter has a Telegram channel, and a good chunk of the people in there are Russian. And we go back and forth about, you know, the United States versus the Soviet Union, and we get down to, not in a contentious way, we're just, you know, figuring each other out, learning about the other side. And I should just say, Kevin, in 1991, I was a high school student, and I went to the Soviet Union as part of a student program.
Really? So cool.
Yeah. So I got to see the collapse of the Soviet Union, really at the beginning of the worst time. But what we discussed was the concept of physical economy, because here we're talking about profit a lot. And this is something that is not taught. Everything today is, can you attach a monetary value to it? Whereas, you know, back when I was young, we used to talk about the international cup of coffee. Did you ever hear that?
No.
So the idea was that the coffee beans, you go to the store and you buy your coffee, and you go home and you make it, but actually your coffee beans are probably grown in, say, Colombia. And then there's a whole process that goes into making it. And maybe the coffee cup comes from, you know, I don't know what, France or some other country. And the whole idea is what goes into making that thing that you're consuming. There's lots of process. It's like milk does not come from the refrigerator at the grocery store. You know, it actually comes from a whole process of farmers. And so the idea of physical economy, and you know, here you're talking about Wallace. one of the people I read about was Walter Reuther, who
Not familiar.
Walter Reuther was the guy that built the UAW. And he was organized labor and civil rights leader. And he has an incredible book. It's slipping my mind right now, which is basically a blueprint for how you organize the American population to understand how to build the country. And so just to your point, we've talked about a number of different people that almost nobody today can even think about. And in fact, I was looking for that 1 Million Jobs book, and it's very difficult to find that book even referenced online today.
Yeah, I mean, it was literally like where in the opening cover, it's like, this was allowed to be printed. It was printed during the war, so they had to get special permission to do that.
Without Henry Wallace, we wouldn't have had the Tennessee Valley Authority, and the concept of the Tennessee Valley Authority, that's the whole fight you got Donald Trump's attention on. The idea was that we were going to turn the megawatt hour of electricity into the new slave working tirelessly for the improvement of mankind. That was the American idea.
And Tennessee Valley Authority was one of the few places that wasn't, now everything's privatized, but they're still not private, correct?
Right. They're still a quasi-public
utility.
private company.
Yeah.
Ryan, you made me think of, have you guys read any of Wendell Berry's stuff?
Oh, no.
Agriculture guy. I mean, his book, what was it called that I read? The Unsettling of America.
Oh, yes. I know that book.
Okay.
Yeah.
He talks about agriculture. It's not about growing things. There's a whole culture that comes with farming and production and sustaining. Again, I live here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. I'm surrounded by the county, which is the largest grouping of Amish in the country. And they've been sustaining their way of life for over 300 years. And it's amazing because they realize it's a culture. It's not just about growing, making profit, things like that. But this economy, this America we want to build, we got to realize it's a culture. And as damaged as it can be, I think it can still be brought up. And
I think so.
So this is, realizing that, yes, hard things are on Haiti, but the invade and invite, the destroy and invite paradigm is not going to work for America. We have to put up the guardrails. What's going on in Springfield has to stop. And I think, it's actually not as hard to reverse as you would think, because everyone who is here is not technically, but inadmissible on so many levels and for so many reasons. They've just been made legal by, one granting either temporary protective service or what they call the CHNV process, the Cuban, Haitian, Nicaraguan, Venezuelan process.
Yeah, you mentioned that in your article.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And all you have to do is say the temporary is over, done, go home, which means they can no longer get work permits. And, and we can't afford it. I mean, I know.
Similar to Ukraine, we just say no money.
Can I ask a question about that, though? Because if you look at countries like France, they have laws that restrict the employer's ability to remove the worker. Like, you can't fire someone and then hire someone back immediately. You can't fire someone and then put someone in. I guess my question is, because I think the border issue is so contingent on America ceasing to destroy other countries, which I think we need to do, and that's very important to me. But I am not sure that the labor practices will get better, because I feel like it's the corporation.
It's the mission.
Well,
it's the
the
mission.
labor practices get better because labor always does better when the market is tight.
But is there a reason not to focus on the corporations like France does versus the border?
Kennedy did, though.
I lived in Belgium during the 1980s, and I used to play golf with this Korean guy who was running a company in Belgium. And he would say, exactly to your point, he'd say, "Oh my gosh, I fired someone, and then I'm looking at another office and they're working there. And they said, that's the law. I couldn't fire them. So they simply moved them out to another office. So it's great to have, and with unions, and you can have those kind of work rules. But until you have labor is tight enough. And we saw that during COVID. All of a sudden, people are paying, people with companies are paying $1,400 hiring bonuses, things like that for semi-skilled labor. Or like we couldn't keep service guys, the company that ran my building, because they are getting hired away for $20 an hour to work at a company, some manufacturer somewhere. And to me, that's a healthy thing. But you cannot have that when you have this huge supply of labor. We saw in 2008, when there was a series of large ice raids. I remember reading an article in the Wall Street Journal where these meatpacking company owners were complaining, saying, oh my gosh, now I got to raise wages. I got to slow down the conveyor belts. I even got to send a van out to homeless shelters and bring people to work. And I'm thinking to myself, what's wrong with that exactly? Give them a little chance. This is their opportunity to get back on their feet. And we saw in the recent spate during the Trump administration of meatpacking raids, where all of a sudden American descendants of slaves are taking the jobs of, in these factories. And they're like, wow, I didn't know this job existed here. This is great. So our large meatpacking industries, I mean, when I was a kid, there were under 800 small meat packing companies across the country. And now 80% of our meat products come from 3 companies.
Exactly.
These places are brutal to work. I mean, my mother worked in a place called Luscious, and they probably employed like 19 people, I'm thinking, if I recall correctly. But she worked up front, and it was run by an old German couple who had built the business from nothing. And this was a nice place to work. I mean, it was a nice place to work. It was a butcher. It was a meat packing plant, but a nice place to work. And those places like that just don't exist anymore.
No, and they're using a lot of the time. What they'll do is they'll use undocumented labor. I lived in North Carolina. I did a dock project on this, and they if you're talking about like the big pork producers, they would bring in these undocumented immigrants, work them like crazy. It's incredibly dangerous. People get maimed, and they don't have insurance. They don't have anything to protect them, and then they won't pay them for weeks at a time, and then they will fire them and never pay them because they actually don't have to, because it just frees up the corporation, because they're there illegally. They have no rights.
They're here illegally. They're not going to go to anyone. And these places prior to NAFTA being signed, we did an event in Phoenix, and the head of the Mexican Farm Workers Union came up to speak. And he was saying this will throw 1 million Mexican farmers off their farms. Right. And it did. And where did they come? They came here to work in the meatpacking industry.
And it destroys their culture. It destroys that's the problem. It's like we're allowing these corporations to destabilize all of our cultures and our societies.
And that I had mentioned this movie, Los Angeles, and I was talking to the director. I can't recall his name right now. And it was funny because what I wanted to do was do a telenovela project with him where we would do a show where we could demonstrate that the streets are not paved in gold in Pasadena, California, but there's gold to be found in your village if you stay there. And it was great. We had a great conversation. He said, when I first accepted your call and learned about you, I thought this conversation would last like a minute. But here we are 20 minutes later, and I like what I'm hearing. And we didn't go forward with it. I actually had lined up a funder. We didn't go forward with it because in Germany, where he's living, it's the government that gives you money to do documentaries and stuff. And he had just gotten a couple grants through, and he's like, I'm, full up for the next couple years. And we never got back, visited again. And so
It's a good subject. I guess, yeah, but my thing is
I
always
have to go. I apologize. I have to
no,
go.
no
So that
worries.
you guys can continue the conversation. Thank you
No,
so
no,
much.
no.
Well, we don't want to keep you forever either. It's just such an interesting subject.
I think there's more we could definitely say. I thought this was an excellent discussion all around.
This was fun. I just looked at the time. It's
I know.
8:15. We
just
started
Oh my
at
gosh.
7.
breezed
Yeah.
through. Yeah,
Wow.
thank you
It's
for
Past Jeff's
us.
bedtime.
I know. Poor Jeff.
No, I have to prepare for my move to Washington, D.C.
Oh,
There you
yeah,
go.
there
Fill out
you
your
go.
Form
Go be on
F-87.
Trump's staff.
There you go.
All right, well, you guys can continue if you want. Don't let
No,
me stop you.
no. I actually have
Then
to
I guess
go
you have
as
to do
well.
a sign off and everything, or
Well, we can. Yeah, we can do
should.
the. All right, before as long as we're going to do it the official way, let's remind people that Kevin's URL there for his organization is Institute for Sound Policy.
sound public policy.
What did I say? Did I forget
You
the
said you
public one?
forgot public.
Everyone does. Institute for Sound Public Policy. Yeah, go to the website. We have 5 Twitter platforms. U.S. Tech Workers is what we're best known for, but Project for Immigration Reform, we do a lot of the more edgier stuff on the immigration front there. U.S. Tech Workers is really the employment visas. The IFSPP social media platform, we're really talking about what we're talking neoliberalism, pushing back against globalization. We are about to launch. We got a little frustrated this week in DC. Some things didn't work out, but we will be soon launching a report on labor practices in the semiconductor industry in the 20th and 21st centuries. It's going to knock a lot of socks off. I'll put it to you this way. When I put the event up on Eventbrite, they suspended my account. We're going after the powers that be. Again, you had the semiconductor industry.
How do we find out about this report?
It'll all be on our website and on our social media platforms.
And that's on the Institute for Sound Public Policy
website. The executive
website?
summary is up now. And when we do our official launch, which will be a virtual with a lot of legislative aides, everyone will be invited to attend. There's an executive summary up there now. It has really strong academic underpinnings, which is something as an organization we lack, because we really rest on 3 pillars. And that is activism, litigation, and policy. And our policy, everyone felt that we were kind of lightweight, on that. And, frankly, because I made it very clear from the outset, I'm an activist. Give me, you're a think tank, give me your stuff. But we found that we weren't getting the kind of policy papers we needed. So we're growing that in-house now. We have a really strong lead researcher on that, and we get some great feedback because we have this army of activists out there that are always feeding us things. In fact, one of our activists will be joining us when we do our launch. He'd worked at Intel for 9 years, and he's a whistleblower. Nice. So that'll be really cool. But
the one thing is, we're not going to be able to do any of this if we don't avoid nuclear war. Yeah. So I would just mention also this Saturday, September 28th in New York, Kingston, New York, Scott Ritter and a bunch of other cool people, Judge Andrew Napolitano, Max Blumenthal, Anya Parampil.
Oh, Gerald Celente. I've hung out with him. Yeah.
They're all going to be there to focus people on stopping nuclear war.
Is that going to be at Gerald Celente's little place there? He has this little square in the
that's where it is.
Outside.
That's
cool.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you can go to this place, it's a great town. Absolutely go to this.
That's so neat. Yeah, I was referencing Max's work tonight in some of the stuff I was talking about. So perfect time.
There you go.
And Ryan wrote his first article because we now have a Substack, you guys. So check it out. And I'm going to put one out with, I need to finish it. This was my first article and it took me longer than I thought I was supposed to get it done for it. And I'm going to get done after. It'll be out in the next year.
We'll get it. It'll be get onto our Substack.
It's new.
Yep. Civil
That's the problem.
Nights.
I got to get the newsletter out when I jump off this tonight. So
all right. So I'm going to toast to everybody here.
Oh,
thanks for joining us, Kevin.
Thanks so much. This was big.
Jeff,
fun.
Wiley.
Yes, I had to pour my drink.
A civil night.
Civil nights.
Civil Knights.
All right. Indeed. All right. We'll stay in touch. We'll follow your progress, and we're going to change the world. Take care, everybody.